name for the 2nd Battalion Royal Anglians? The answer is the Poachers.
But first, something that has been troubling me all morning. We're asking if the authorities were wrong to allow protesters to heckle an army homecoming parade yesterday. 200 members of the 2nd Battalion Royal Anglian Regiments, brave men and women normally based in Germany, are returned to Luton, Bedfordshire, where many had been recruited after a 6-month stint in Basra. They were greeted not just by thousands of well-wishers, but also by a small mob of Muslim protesters. The demonstrators, some 15 men watched by an equal number of women in burqas, shouted such insults as criminals, murderers, terrorists, cowards, baby killers, while waving placards. And eventually, a handful of the well-wishers turned on the protesters and the police made 2 arrests, both, I should stress, from the well-wishers camp. It's an awful dilemma. I mean, how do you square the soldiers' right to a very well-deserved homecoming parade with that of the protesters' right to free speech? The soldiers have fought and died for centuries to protect our rights in this country, and those rights nearly always include free speech and the right to protest. That's why 1 million of us could support the anti-war march 6 years ago, just before the illegal invasion of Iraq. I marched. I was angry. I was furious with Tony Blair and George W. Bush. But I wasn't angry with the soldiers, because the ones I know and the ones I've spoken to on this show, by and large, didn't believe the war was right either, which makes their bravery and their sense of duty even more awesome. So should the police have got involved? Should they have stopped the protest, blocked the protesters' right to free speech? Well, they can if there's likely to be a breach of the peace. And I'm not Einstein, but it did strike me that a breach of the peace would have been extremely likely, especially as Luton is one of the most ethnically diverse parts of the UK. And indeed, a government report last year named it as one of the main centres of Islamic extremist activity in Britain. So an army homecoming parade was bound to stoke up strong feelings in the area. Maybe it should never have been allowed to happen, Ed.
Well, I would have supported
the
the police if they had banned the demonstration on the grounds of public safety, which they're perfectly entitled to do. I think what happened yesterday was absolutely appalling. I mean, just really, really appalling. You know, we pride ourselves on this country, in being a diverse community that lives together. And these people, who I think I should stress are a very, very small minority in my view, and don't represent the
Were they shouting at the wrong people? I mean,
well, I was going to come on to that. I mean, I don't think they represent the Muslim community. I think they've done a massive disservice to race relations in this country. Now, if you said to me, if it was Gordon Brown, my leader David Cameron, Nick Clegg walking down that road and they were demonstrating, fair enough. They're the political leaders, they make the decisions, they're responsible. Our soldiers who go and fight are not responsible. And they, as you said, they're very brave men and women who put their lives at risk. A lot of them have been killed, many, many more have been injured, and to come back after 6 months or a year, serving away from your family, to be greeted by your fellow British citizens is just mind-bogglingly appalling.
OK. Janet?
I don't think it's as clear-cut as that, though, because I think they looked silly, and then they stopped looking silly when everyone else took it seriously. The people marching have put up with way worse than that. I would imagine it's water off a duck's back, really. Yeah, and the shouts of the crowd by far outnumbered the shouts of the 30 people.
I don't agree with you, and I'll tell you why. Because, you know, funnily enough, I do this Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme, which attaches me to the Royal Marines. I've been out to visit troops in Afghanistan, and there is absolutely no doubt, and it picks up on Matthew's point about how controversial this war is, that one of the things that does keep our troops going is the thought that the public support them. They may disagree with the politicians, but the public support them. And I actually think, and Monty may shed more light on this, I suspect it is far easier for a soldier to be taking in mortar rounds and having a weapon he can fight back with than coming back to his hometown and having abuse screamed at him by his
let's hear some more from you, Janet.
Yes, except that, you know, this is the same country that in certain towns banned people in uniform from coming into their pubs. You know, I think we have a very odd, conflicted feeling about the soldiers. Yeah. Do all returning regiments have a parade through the town? You know, maybe don't do that for a while. Maybe they have done a brilliant thing in terms of being a soldier. They have served well. Do they need to march through the town?
I think that would be an appalling retrograde step. And
what,
in response
to stop the parades?
To stop the parades. The parades mean the world to the guys coming back. A lot of these are counties regiments. They're coming back to their hometown where they're based. of that acknowledgement of the townspeople to turn out and applaud just means the world, I
Yes.
think, to a lot of these
In which
regiments.
case-
And say we're not going to do it because there might be protests.
Fine, but I think allow the
absurd.
protests,
Yeah.
allow them, because the louder they shout, perversely, the less noise they make to me. You know, it doesn't mean it represents anything of what people actually think. It was confined to a very tiny minority. By taking it seriously and amplifying it, you then build a whole debate about what they were doing and what they feel. Let it happen. It's tiny.
Okay, Monty, I mean, Ed's point about, you know, facing mortar, it could be, I don't know if easier is the right word, more familiar perhaps than being abused in your homeland. Is that really true?
Yeah, I should hastily point out, I've never served in Iraq or Afghanistan, but I've got many, many friends out there who obviously are serving at the moment. It's a hugely complex issue, this, isn't it? Because the politics we know, you know, very contentious and all that sort of stuff. But there wasn't a single bloke, man or woman, on that parade who asked to go out to Iraq. They went out there because they were sent out there by the politicians. They've gone out there to do a superbly professional job. And as Ed's already pointed out, to have that protest screaming at them, calling them baby murderers and things like that, is completely misplaced. But it's a small minority. There's a great quote here from Shahid Malik, the Justice Minister, saying these extremists in Luton no more represent ordinary Muslims than the real IRA represent ordinary Irish people. I think that's a great...
If they weren't Muslims, if they were anti-war protesters, full stop, the Muslim is irrelevant. I think if they were anti-war protesters...
That's a very good point, actually.
I would feel exactly the same way, really.
There's a sub-story, though, that I quite like. There isn't a person who's heard this story, I don't think, of the vast majority of the British population who hasn't felt a sense of outrage.
Yeah.
And it was interesting when the demonstration really got going, and I think it was the nature of the demonstration, what they were screaming at the soldiers. I think that's what made everyone incandescent with rage. And the fact that the people of Luton turned on this demonstration, you had little old ladies getting stuck in with their brollies and things like that. And apparently the soldiers were very receptive to that. They were like, fantastic, you know, that the people of our town have defended us, basically, in the face of this extremist stuff that's happening on the streets. And I think that was quite a nice little subplot to it, that the people of Luton actually won't stand for that. And I think that's a good thing.
Let's throw it open to you then. As I said, it is a difficult issue, squaring the rights of brave men and women who have done their duty, albeit in a war that many people don't approve of, including many soldiers, versus the rights of people to protest, Muslim or otherwise. Let's be quite clear about that. It wouldn't matter to me a jot if they were white, left-wing agitators. It really doesn't. If people had a strong feeling and started shouting at the soldiers, would that be wrong? Let's see what you have to say.
OK, let's start with Sally first on line 1.